Over the years, the Lumix S5 Mark II has received so many powerful firmware upgrades, but one that I've neglected is the Frame.io camera-to-cloud integration, which helps you edit at the speed of live. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind-the-scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. Today, I want to talk you through the Frame.io camera-to-cloud integration, how you get it set up on your Lumix camera, and why you would want to do something like this. You see, it's one of those things that when they announced it, I was immediately excited, but then I just kept editing and operating as I always do. We build these workflows, we get in kind of a rhythm or a groove or maybe a rut, as a bad way to describe it, of we just have our habits, we have our tendencies, and we tend to stick to them. So even though the Frame.io camera-to-cloud integration came out for the S5 Mark II, I didn't have the S5 Mark II at that point in time. By the time I got the S5 Mark II, I had kind of forgotten about this whole upgrade to the camera, which basically lets you stream your proxies or upload your proxies in real time to the Frame.io servers, at which point you can integrate with Premiere and you can sort of edit in real time as you're shooting. And I thought, with the recent firmware upgrade for the S5 Mark II, I should go back and really set this up on my camera to take full advantage. And there are some pitfalls, there's some hurdles, there's some quirks, there's some little weird stuff that I want to talk you through because it isn't as easy as clicking a button. Although it is pretty easy. It's very simple. Anyone can do it, but you have to know what to do. And there's a few stumbling blocks. There's a few head scratchers that'll make you go like, oh, what's going wrong? How can I figure this out? So basically, if you have an S5 Mark II or any other camera that has this Frame.io integration, you can connect it to camera-to-cloud, which is the Frame version of uploading proxies, JPEGs, and RAW. This isn't for your full resolution media. It's only for proxies. Obviously, you wouldn't want to upload terabytes of data probably over any type of connection. So it's really meant for proxy workflows. And you can do it pretty easily by going in the Lumix camera menu and turning on Frame.io. It's there in the wrench menu. And you can find it pretty quickly. You need to connect it to some kind of internet service. So what I did is I connected it to my hotspot on my phone. I figure no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I will always have my phone hotspot. If you want a more dedicated, faster wireless, then obviously you can connect it to any Wi-Fi. You just have to enter the name and the password and you get it connected, and that's all pretty seamless. And then it takes you one step further where you need to connect to Frame your account. Basically, you go on the Frame website in your account and there'll be a pairing code under camera to cloud. You just type that code in from the camera on the desktop, and that will allow Frame to sync up. You can think of it kind of like how whenever you pair your Netflix account on your television or your Apple TV or any kind of these streaming platforms, you usually have a code on either end, either on your phone or on the TV, and when you connect those two, it knows that they're connected, and obviously it can find the camera and knows where to send that media. So at this point, you're all connected and it should just work. But here's where some of those sticking points come into play. This only works for proxies, meaning you need two cards in the S5 Mark II. The S5 Mark II won't record proxies as well as full resolution media to the same card. You need that secondary slot 2, to record the proxies. This is a little different from how Sony cameras do it, where they record the proxies right with the full resolution media. So it had me kind of confused. I was wondering, like, what's going on? Why am I not getting proxies? You need two media cards, and it's going to be that second slot that's going to record those proxies. The other goofy thing about this is that now you lose your backup, your dual slot function. So if you're the type of person that wants to record to two SD cards for backup, for redundancy, for safety, you kind of lose that feature by taking advantage of this proxy workflow, because the card 1 slot will be your full resolution media and your card 2 slot will be your proxies. So that's something to be aware of. You need two cards, you need to use both slots. You'll lose dual slot functionality for backup recording, and you'll only have proxies on that second card. The other thing that's goofy in this setup is if you're someone that likes to take advantage of 6K OpenGate, which I do, we've talked about it frequently. 6K OpenGate, you can't record proxies with that file format for whatever reason. So you have to be in a more standardized traditional 4K UHD format. I haven't tested all the different resolutions and aspect ratios. There's a few others, higher resolution. But for me, I went to my standard tried and true 4K, just your standard 422 10-bit, and then I was able to record proxies on the Lumix S5 Mark II. So once I got those two things set up, I was actually able to beam these proxy files to Frame.io right through my hotspot on my phone. And the hotspot's a little slower than your regular Wi-Fi. So if you do want some kind of dedicated, consistent connection, I would recommend going for the Wi-Fi route if you have a fast router, fast internet connection. But that does require dedicated space. You know, it takes the timing, the planning versus a hotspot, which I can do almost anywhere as long as I have signal. So thankfully, those proxy files are quite small. I think they're 95% smaller than the original media. I think I was doing the math, and like an 80 megabit full resolution file, megabyte, I forget which one it is, megabytes probably. 80 megabytes scaled down to like a 5 megabyte proxy file. So I was using the lowest proxy settings. You can do higher. The Lumix S5 Mark II is smart enough to give you the option of if you want, you know, HD proxies or even like 720 proxies, which I was doing the lowest, just because again, I'm using a hotspot and I don't want to slow it down. And uploads, you know, they were, I mean, I guess it's the time it would take between setups. So that's kind of in theory how this is all supposed to work. As long as you're recording short enough takes and you're stopping and starting, you know, frequently enough, anytime you're not recording, the camera is looking to send those files to the cloud. And you do have to turn this on in the Frame.io settings. There's some upload, you know, by default, like, do you want to automatically add your files to the queue, which you should turn on. So that's what I did. And that way, these files will just constantly be uploading as you're filming them. But if you shoot too many clips, you're going to have like a buffer, basically. You're going to have a waiting period where those need to be uploaded. So as you're shooting, you know, there's a cadence, a rhythm to the production, but usually as long as your camera is on while you're not recording, and as long as it has that Wi-Fi connection, it should be uploading to Frame. From there, you're wondering, okay, they're in Frame, great, but what do I do? And that's where my question kind of took over, like, okay, great. Frame is yeah, I use Frame all the time for reviewing and downloading assets, but it's very rare that I would use it as my, you know, editing suite or my editing platform for where my footage is in Premiere, because I've just never used it that way. But I thought, okay, the Frame got bought by Adobe. They're kind of one and the same now. There is an integration. I'm using the older Frame legacy profile. I haven't upgraded to their newest V4, so there might be some differences there, which I'm sure there are. You know, always be a little skeptical, a little hesitant to upgrade. If something's working, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. That's kind of my mindset. So I'm using the older Frame legacy account, whatever that means, and you can connect it right to Premiere. It's actually natively built in Premiere since version 22, I believe. So there's, and I didn't even know this, but there's a workspace for review in Premiere. So if you look for your workspaces, you go to review, and Frame will actually just pop right up. It's a little window in Premiere. You log in. All the login is easy, although there's a lot of logging in when you're setting all these things up. You have to constantly re-credential yourself over and over again as you're signing into Frame, you know, connecting to the camera and then again connecting it to Premiere. Lots of authorization. So it's a little tedious, but it does get up and running. And this integration works quite well. I'm very happy to say that you can see all your Frame stuff right in Premiere. Maybe you've already done this because you use Frame as kind of a platform for producers or clients, so they're going to review, leave comments, and it's, you know, it's all very easy and intuitive right there in Premiere. But this is where it was tricky because I could see all the footage in Frame. It was making its way there, but how do I get that into Premiere? I was like, can I drag and drop? And no, you can't. Basically, you have to manually download each file in this little browser window in Premiere. And I found that kind of tedious. It seems like an oversight, seems like there's a better way to do this. So I did go through the steps and figure out a better way for me to do it, but at its core, you can manually download each clip individually. You save it wherever you want to save it, and then it can automatically import into Premiere. That's a tedious way to do it. It's very, it's not automated. And this whole process, I want Camera to Cloud to be as automated. So it's just happening. I don't want to have to manually sit there and watch a folder. Like we have watch folders in other programs and other software for a reason. Just the computer can just watch a folder and automatically do something in the background while you're doing something else. And so I thought there's got to be a better way. And I, for the life of me, looked around if Adobe had any solution, if Frame had any kind of solution. The other, cloud-based system that I use and I actually like the best is called LucidLink. If you're familiar with LucidLink, you probably already love it. If you've never used LucidLink before, I guarantee you will love it. It is basically just a cloud hard drive that operates like any other hard drive. You mount it to any desktop anywhere in the world and everybody can just share the same files. It kind of works with this streaming data, but it works just like a hard drive. All the promises of Google Drive and Dropbox and all those platforms that don't ever work quite the way you want, LucidLink solves all those problems and it just works. It's just the cloud hard drive, super easy, very simple to set up. Although there's some authorization, credentialing you need to do. Once you get all that taken care of, you're good. And so I was wondering, is there a way, because LucidLink, you can edit right off of it. Even though it's in the cloud, it's still a hard drive where Premiere can import the files and you can, work off of it just like a regular hard drive, just like your regular footage, even though it's in the cloud. Frame seems to be like, locked behind its software. So you have to download it somewhere. And I thought, well, it'd be great if I could automatically connect Frame to LucidLink and get the files at least over there, again, cloud to cloud, so to speak. This adds cost because Frame costs you money, LucidLink costs you money, but you can do it by paying a little bit more and getting another application called SiloSync. Silosync.io is the website. The part of the software that I actually wanted was what they call Silo Watch, which basically watches your Frame account, watches your folders, whichever one you want, and it'll automatically download and re-upload or save. It's not really uploading, I guess. LucidLink is uploading automatically by itself. So it's automatically downloading to wherever you want. You wouldn't have to use LucidLink in this scenario, although I do think it's helpful if you do have multiple editors, multiple remote people. It's just always accessible. The moment you take something from the cloud and you make it a downloadable asset, if you're saving it locally, all of a sudden no one else has access to it unless you have some kind of NAS server set up where people can log in and do all that kind of thing. But if you want a true cloud accessible version, I think LucidLink is the best version of that. Again, Frame, it's technically there, anyone could log in, but there's always that step of downloading the files somewhere so that Premiere can access them. And I think that's a little bit clunky. I would hope to see in the future Adobe figures this out. And if you could just edit footage right from within Frame, the way LucidLink works, that would be a huge lifesaver in this setup, just because there's less software to have. There's less versions that are floating around there. But anyway, you can with Silo Watch, it'll watch that LucidLink folder where everything is being uploaded. And what's kind of cool about this is it can run basically anywhere on any computer. So it doesn't even have to be your edit workstation. You could have a different computer set up that's just watching your Frame folder. And as things are being uploaded there, Silo Watch is downloading them locally, which again, you could do, and this would be fine. Although my recommendation would be just download them to your LucidLink folder, and then all that stuff is accessible no matter where you are. So this other computer just sitting there watching can be doing all the work for you. And then at this point, whoever's editing, whether it's you or someone else, which is probably the best way to do this, having two people, someone shooting, someone editing, can be pulling those files from LucidLink right into Premiere. It's an extra step and ultimately doesn't save you as much time as I would hope in the long run. It's just that difference of, do you want to automatically be downloading, or do you want to have to sit there and watch in Premiere when new files show up, hit download and save them every time yourself manually? It's a small time savings versus it happening automatically, but either way, you still have to go through the step of getting the stuff into Premiere. Ideally in the future, I would love to see this completely streamlined where you could go from camera to cloud and cloud right into Premiere all seamlessly. Maybe there's a way to do it. If you figured it out, please leave a comment. But for all the Googling, all the searching, all the looking around on Reddit, I couldn't find anyone who'd really taken advantage of this to the way that I know is possible, which would be as something is being filmed, there is somebody able to edit it as it's being filmed, which is basically editing it at the speed of live, which I think is very powerful, especially for certain types of projects, whether it's events, weddings, even corporate stuff. Most clients want quick turnarounds. They don't want to have to sit there and wait. By the time the shoot's over, their hype has died down, their excitement is lost, their enthusiasm, okay, a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever it is. If you can get people stuff very quickly, I think it just helps. It makes everything more efficient. And I think it's quite impressive actually to make something high quality and edited that isn't live, but feels like, hey, it's already done. A lot of these live streamers nowadays are able to clip things up in real time so that basically once the live stream is over, there's all these clips that get published. It's the same mentality, but just a more traditional filmmaker production workflow where you're shooting in the field, shooting your B-roll, your A-roll, your interview, whatever it is you're filming, and all of that's being sent to an editor in real time. I also think it helps speed up post-production instead of having to look through hundreds of files in kind of, here you go, editor, here's everything I shot. And it's this manual process of like, what is all this stuff? You got to go through, you got to organize, get a filter. If you have an editor who can just bit by bit, piece by piece, kind of eat away at that footage in real time. Oh, here's a new shot. Okay, I understand. And they're processing the footage at the same time you're shooting. I think it also just helps speed up post-production as well, rather than giving someone like a whole novel to read. Here, read all of Lord of the Rings. Well, here, you're feeding them a page at a time. And I don't know, there's just something to that. I don't know, maybe if it's some kind of a human mental block or something, where just when things are bigger, they seem harder, they seem more difficult to get through versus, just read this page, just read this page, just read this page, just edit this clip, edit this clip, edit this clip. So you can get it all set up. It does cost a little bit to optimize all these things. Thankfully, like I'm already using Frame, I'm already using Lucid Link, so the only thing I had to buy myself was Silo Watch, which is currently in beta. It's not even like a full-fledged feature-rich product or service. I have no idea what this company is or who they are. It's probably just some person somewhere who developed this thing to do this one function, which is watch your Frame.io folders and download them. So it is helpful. It does get the job done. And I may end up finding a better, more automated solution. Again, there's probably ways you could do this if you knew a little bit of code, if you're familiar with GitHub or some kind of FTP protocols. I'm not that savvy when it comes to software. I kind of like to just use the stuff off the shelf. But if you have a better solution, please let me know in the comments. Although if it involves any kind of opening up terminal or anything like that, I think that's the step removed where it's not intuitive for most people to figure that stuff out. And so, although you probably will disagree if you're that type of person, it just limits the usability. And I think ultimately camera to cloud is not actually as used as I thought it would be, because it's still kind of limited. Not every camera has access to it. It requires the proprietary or the Frame platform, which is part of Adobe. So it's very narrowly focused. And I think this is another testament to something I've been talking about, where if features are too limited, to like too individualized to a specific camera, a specific model, a specific brand, they don't become ubiquitous. Everyone isn't using the same stuff because everyone has their own little solution to it. And none of these things ever catch on in a way that they get fully optimized, that they get fully embraced, and people can actually figure out what is the best workflow. And we can kind of connect those dots to get to a solution where whatever you're shooting on the camera is being edited in Premiere. That's my goal. In the past, it would be take the SD card, copy to a hard drive, import into Premiere, let it do its thing, process all the WAV files, and now you can start editing. It's kind of these bigger batches of content, a whole SD card of 200 gigabytes, 500 gigabytes, a terabyte of footage all in one go, waiting for the download, waiting for it to sync, all that kind of stuff. I like this idea of chipping away at it clip by clip, and then maybe reconnecting, those proxies to the full resolution media later, which is ultimately what you need to do, right? Even if you're editing the proxies, you still have this final component where you're taking the full resolution media, copying it to a hard drive, and relinking in Premiere. So that is the final step that I should say. You're not going to export the proxy files. They're going to be replaced by the full resolution media. So there is the same step that was always there. It's just kind of a shortcut to get to your edit quicker than needing the full resolution media, which should speed up editing as well, right? If they're proxy files, they should play back faster and all that. So I like it in theory. I think it can work for people right now. It's just a little clunky, a little bit it's just not fully complete. Getting footage into Frame is cool. It is nice. I'm glad that it works right with the camera body. There's nothing to attach. There's no special, box that needs an extra battery or anything else. There's nothing to plug in. It just works right from the Lumix camera. There's other cameras that do this as well, natively built right in, but I'm really glad that Panasonic and Adobe or Frame, they kind of work together to make this all happen with the S5 Mark II. But I do think it needs a little bit more development on that post-production side. So once the footage is in Frame, what are you doing? How are you getting that into Premiere in a way that's automated, that doesn't require someone sitting there and downloading each clip as it comes? I mean, on a regular shoot day, that could be 200, 300, 400 clips that someone has to painstakingly download themselves just to open them in Premiere. I would love to see a solution where as things are being shot, they're appearing on your timeline in Premiere, because that's the goal. That's where the editor then takes over and can do something with it. All the in-betweens, all the connecting, yes, we've figured out how to get it from the camera to the cloud, but what about the cloud to the editor? That's where it is kind of a sticking point, and my solution was these other things like Silo Watch and Lucid Link to actually make that fully happen in still a kind of cloud-based workflow. So you could use Silo Watch to download locally, at which point you're just importing and that's easy enough. But I think there's a power to Lucid Link, and Frame could be that. Frame is accessible by anyone who has a login for that account or that profile. So anyone, it could be done all by Adobe and Frame, but I don't know if they'll get there. Or maybe it's an ignorance on my part. Maybe they do already have this function, but I've looked at the Frame desktop app, the Frame transfer app. I've looked at, I think there's even a Frame extension. There's all these different little pieces of software, and there doesn't seem to be that one that's meant for this workflow that's taking a folder and just getting it into Premiere. So I would love to see that in the future. It is pretty cool technology, and it's great if you have an S5 Mark II or any other camera that supports Frame.io, camera to cloud. Take advantage, use it, because I do think if you can get it set up for your specific workflows, your situation, it's quite impressive for a client or for anyone to get those edits back that quickly, because by the end of the shoot day, the edit could be done. And that mindset, like as I'm finished production, instead of taking that card back, copying it, handing it to an editor, they have to spend days to then re-go through everything I just did. It's a totally different mindset to just be editing in real time. Again, editing at the speed of live, where you're just getting what's happening. But again, not live streamed. It's not, doesn't require any kind of like stream connection. It's happening passively in between takes. And I think it's not a perfect solution for every project. There's plenty of things where it would probably become very difficult. Any kind of multicam would get incredibly complicated, tracking all those files and making sure stuff stays in sync. But it's, again, probably achievable. It just depends on what level of technical expertise you're willing to throw at it. How many bits of software, how many little components do you want to set up and optimize? Because that would require certainly probably multiple connections, certainly multiple hotspots if you had multiple cameras, but that would require some kind of dedicated, really good wireless connection that actually has a decent upload rate, which even these days is still kind of hard to come by. They're few and far between. Most people on their internet and their Wi-Fi, they're checking email, they're working on a Google Doc. They're not doing what we're trying to do, which is upload crazy amounts of data in real time. It's a kind of a specialty thing, certainly more and more common as live streamers have those same demands. But from a production standpoint, it'd be very rare that you would walk into any kind of office building or just like a generic, hey, what's your Wi-Fi? Can I connect? And you would have reliable upload speeds. That's probably not something I would bite off right now. I'd have to have something a little bit more custom, a little bit more intentional, and a little bit more dedicated if I was going to do any kind of multicam with this setup. But it is cool. You can do JPEGs and RAW photos as well. So if you're just worried about photography, that's a component of this as well, that you can bring those into Lightroom and edit in real time, quote unquote. You're still the process of getting it to happen. So let's not forget, it's not just a video thing. This is for photography as well, but it depends on what your application is. For me, I love the idea of shooting video and having it edited in real time. It's just a few things to connect, a few things to optimize, and a few limitations on the production side. Again, losing that dual card slot functionality, dedicating a whole card to just proxies, maybe something you don't even want to consider. Maybe you need to shoot 6K open gate, in which case you can't record proxies on the S5 Mark II currently. Theoretically, they could change that, I guess, with a firmware update. It seems like it wouldn't be all that hard to implement. So I don't know what the limitation is there or why it is that way, but you can't do it currently. So that's maybe another deal breaker right from the start. But I'm actually impressed with how well it works at face value. The parts that are advertised, the functionality does work, and that part is easy to set up. It's more of the complete picture, the final stages where you go, yes, I got it into frame, but seems like I should be able to connect it to Premiere a little bit easier. Hopefully it's all stuff that can be fixed with software, because at this point, that's all it is. There's no hardware limitations. It's purely just software and functionality and making sure that it can be connected. I'm, again, surprised. Frame is an Adobe product. Premiere's an Adobe product. Make it a little bit easier for us, Adobe. We're paying crazy amounts of money every single month to use your software. I would appreciate that these things that do get rolled out, but maybe if not enough people are using it, they're never going to invest in it. And that's my fear for the future, that this just becomes kind of a, what do they call that? Where like the software basically just dies, becomes defunct, like old video games where they had the servers and they turn them off. And so you technically own the game, but you can't even play it anymore. I feel like if not enough people use this functionality, if it doesn't get embraced at a wide enough level, it'll never be reinvested in. And eventually it might just fade away into the back, or they'll come out with a new version that doesn't work with the old cameras. You know, who knows? But when it's software based, not hardware based, that is a risk factor, that what works now might not work in 3 or 5 or 10 years. And the systems and workflows we're building now could be better. They could be expanded. They could be improved, but they could also just kind of fade away into nothingness where it just doesn't work anymore. And those are the types of things that give me a little bit of hesitation, give me a little bit of a bad feeling where, yes, I can jump through all the hoops now, but if it's never going to be accepted at a wide enough level where it's actually implemented at a core root level, like Premiere should just have this functionality. You know, why does it even have to go through Frame? Let's just do camera to cloud right into Premiere. That would be the true next step, because that's really all. Frame is an in-between. It's kind of a, I don't know what to call it. It's grown this ability, camera to cloud, but Frame isn't any important part of that. It's Premiere. It's the editing suite that's the important part of that. If the files were they could be hosted anywhere. I don't really care where they're at. LucidLink is my preferred one, you know, but whatever. Anything with similar functionality would be fine. I just need a place to store the proxies, but I need them in Premiere to edit right away, not this manual, tedious process of downloading them. So I do recommend check it out, get familiar with it, because it is worth knowing and understanding how it works to find any kind of technical improvement ends up unlocking so many creative possibilities. You start thinking, oh, well, now I could do X, Y, and Z. And that is why I love digging into this stuff. Because it pushes you, I think, to think a little bit different, to be a little bit more creative, and come up with solutions to problems you may not even have considered that they were problems. You thought, that's just the way it is. That's just how we work. Well, with more options, with more power comes, what is it? The great responsibility? I don't know. I forget it right now. But you can do a lot when you have new features like this that actually unlock an ability that wasn't even there before. Like I've talked about that. I want features to come to these cameras that are new ways of working. They aren't just a little bit faster, a little bit better. Yes, improvements are always great. We want better image quality. We want better color. We want better everything. But I also want new features, new functionality that improves the way I work when it's actually maximized and pushed to its fullest.